Hello and welcome to the Holistically Psyched podcast. I'm your host, Mariah Choate, a nationally certified school psychologist turned stay-at-home mom who now has the freedom to share what school districts don't want you to know after spending over a decade in the field of education. My goal is to help you learn all you need to know about special education that districts often gatekeep. Each episode will dive into how commonly laws are blatantly broken and tips on leveraging special education law to support best practice for students and teachers alike. We'll also feature interviews with parents and educators who are navigating these challenges head-on, along with those who are making strides to improve this broken system. This channel is for you, parents of students with suspected or diagnosed disabilities who already have or might need individualized education plans or 504 plans. It's also for teachers, counselors, and fellow school psychologists who are feeling the strain of a system that often leaves us feeling burnt out and overwhelmed. So if you're ready to learn, advocate, and empower yourself, child, or students, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Welcome back to Holistically Psyched, the podcast where we talk all things special education advocacy and whole person wellness from the lens of school psychologists, educators, and parents walking this path together. Today, I'm so excited to welcome Courtney Johnson, a virtual school psychologist and wellness mentor who is changing the game in how we support students, families, and ourselves in this ever-evolving world of education. Courtney's journey into the virtual space is not only inspiring but deeply empowering for other professionals and families alike, especially those who are seeking opportunities for different virtual options. Today, she's sharing how she got here, what she's learned, and how she now supports others more boldly, more holistically, and with intention. Courtney, thank you so much for being here. I'd love to hear your story. Can you share a little bit with us? Take us back to the beginning. How did you start in school psychology? What eventually led you to transition into a virtual role?
Hello. So my road to school psychology, I actually graduated and then worked in day treatment. So I worked in private day treatment for 2 years and got to work with students who had high needs. And, everyone in our building was there because of either significant learning support needed or behavioral support. So working with them pretty closely, I decided that I wanted to apply to be a school psychologist and go to grad school. And so that's really how it began. And then I started in person. This will be my 10th year as a school psych. And I've done a bunch of different, settings, as you would say. I've been in inner city. I've been more rural. I went between those two. And then for the past almost going into full 3 years, it'll be my third full year this year, I am a virtual school psychologist now. And it's kind of funny how everything works out because obviously COVID happened. So in the middle of my, stint in person, we went through those years, which were very demanding, mentally exhausting, and just unlike anything we'd ever seen in education and in the world, right? So I was pretty burnt out. After doing that for 2 years and was like, maybe there's something different out here for me. I didn't know what it was, but I watched NASP that year online in my living room, and they were talking about virtual assessment. And I was like, that's a thing? People are doing this virtually? Like, what's that? What's that like? So I'm learning all about it. And then I'm going straight to LinkedIn. And I was like, virtual school psychologist. Is this a thing? Does this exist? And I actually connected with my recruiter and started looking at jobs, and ended up applying 2 jobs that year and landed a job in July, and I've been here ever since. So it's been just kind of thinking about things and wondering if they could be possible, and then just figuring out how to navigate it all because, virtual psychology is such a new part of our field that when I was going through all of this, I had no idea what I was doing. There was no one really talking about it or leading the way, I guess. So it was kind of me investigating, what does this mean? How to prepare myself for interviews, etc. When I was going in. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting because when I first got out of grad school, my first job was at an agency, and they very much marketed it as a virtual school psychologist. And it turns out they just wanted someone in the office, but like no kids would be in person with the school psychologist. So I was literally in like a room by myself. So I was
No.
like, yeah, and I was treating like I was counseling with students virtually. I was doing assessments virtually. I would drive up like an hour and a half at a time, like to go assess kids
Yeah.
for like different stuff that had to be done in person. But I was actually at the office. I wasn't like at home. And
That's
so I ended up switching. Yeah, that's when I ended up switching to the school district that I ended up doing my internship at the time.
okay.
So, yeah, it's so interesting when you think of like, is this a thing? Like, can we
Mm-hmm.
even do assessments virtually? It's kind of like mind blowing to get into that like brand new field.
Yeah. It was a whole different thing. I mean, when I was in grad school, it wasn't discussed. It wasn't even a possibility. And now I've talked to some newer grads, and it's something that they're bringing up, but it's not something they're getting formal training in.
Right. That's so interesting. Yeah, and I'm glad you like found your niche. I'm sure you love it. Do you love
I
it?
love it. I love it
Good.
so much.
That's so exciting. So let's talk about all the pros since you love it so much, which is awesome. I know there are a lot of misconceptions out there. So
Yes.
what have been the biggest benefits from working virtually, just both professionally and personally for you?
Gosh, let's start personally. And number one is definitely mental health, because working in a rural setting, which is where I predominantly was, I was driving up to 2, 3 hours a day by the time I commuted, drove between my schools. There wasn't really downtime. And, some days didn't even know what the weather was like outside, because most of the places that we're testing or that we're doing things in don't even have windows. And so it was like I wasn't getting the basic things of, getting outside, having a mental break, being able to like take a deep breath. At home, it's the simple things like being able to go for a walk on my lunch break, being able to cook a hot meal, not live out of a lunchbox that's in my passenger seat that I'm grabbing out of because I have to drive, 15 miles between schools and it's lunchtime. And so I'm just going to eat while I'm driving. It's just the simple things of allowing myself to slow down and get more sleep. If anybody out there is commuting, that I had up to an hour commute, each way. So that's an extra time for me to take care of myself, get my workouts in the morning, be able to sleep a little bit more. So it's just kind of created more self-care. And I don't feel like I'm spread so thin. I mean, yes, it's still school psychology. You're going to be busy. You're going to be slammed. Like, there is no immunity in virtual for that. Like, you're still crazy busy, but you get the pause. And I feel like I'm able to give more support, because going from building to building is hopping in and out of Google Meets. I mean, essentially that's what it is. I can be at 4 different schools between 8 a.m. and noon and get eligibilities done, have child study. So it allowed me to be more efficient in what I'm doing and give parents, and we talk about this in a second, but it just gives a lot of other people benefits as well. It's just an easier model for a lot of people to integrate into a society where we quite literally run on technology. So it's just more access for people.
And I'm sure, I don't know how you feel, but I'm sure it makes like meeting with different coworkers and stuff like very specific to, okay, what is your need? And
Yes.
then we're on the computer and we're going to get off. It's not like, okay, we're just going to chat and spend time together and take a break. It's like, no, we're to the
Yes.
point, on to the next meeting.
It's like, I love you, but I can walk to my bathroom and no one stops me in the hallway, right?
Right.
It's very deliberate, which is also, again, very effective, right? Can I
Yeah.
consult with you? Cool. Let's set up a Google Meet and we hop on for our 15, 20 minutes and then we're done, So I think it also helps coworkers set better boundaries to where they're not just using up all their lesson planning time, for example. It's very deliberate and like, let's meet for this amount of time and let's get something done. Yeah.
Yeah. So for anyone who is listening who might be curious or considering a similar shift in their career, what steps or tips would you give someone trying to land a virtual school psych position or maybe transition into remote services? Is there anything that you wish you would have known earlier?
Yes. Not all virtual school psychology jobs or agencies are created equal. They're not all created equal. I'd say the biggest topic people bring up when we talk about virtual service is still making sure you're following the standards of practice and being ethical and being standardized with what you're doing. So, you're going to see that different agencies have different platforms and different standards to the way that they expect their psychologists to work. They're also going to treat you a little bit differently too. So I would do your research on, what kind of hours they offer, what kind of resources they offer, what's your pay like, what's the expectation, because there's just so many different models out there and different delivery styles depending on, who you're employed by. And then get as much experience as you can using virtual means. So, even if you are using, Google Meet, you're using virtual rating forms, anything that you're using that's a virtual platform, use that on your resume. Like, you want to make sure that you can demonstrate that you can be organized and effective in a virtual role. And if you come from just using paper pencil, it's going to be a bigger learning curve than if you've been doing even things like digital scoring, offering virtual meetings to parents, using Google Voice to contact parents. It's just small things like that demonstrate that you're able to go into technology and use it well.
That makes a lot of sense. And I'm thinking of, there's like friends that I have that are still practicing school psychologists, and when I would tell them about like a health and development form or like a teacher input form of like, oh yeah, here's a Google Doc, like send this to them. And it's like mind blowing to them where they're like, oh, what? Like you don't have them like fill out a piece of paper? I'm like, no, because when I would send pieces of paper, no one would return it.
Yes.
But yet when you put it as like a quick thing they can fill out on their phone, it's like, oh yeah, let me just do this real quick and send it in. I love that. That's a really good tip. One thing I find really fascinating and really important is how virtual school psychs like you can actually support families in a much more intentional way. I don't know if that's just because you're not as pulled thin in terms of, like you said, I'm walking from my office to the bathroom and I get stopped with another crisis or whatever. Maybe because you're not physically on a campus. But I don't know if you can speak to that a little bit. How has being in a virtual role actually allowed you to help parents better understand their rights, special education law, and even like the whole IEP process?
Number one, when you said availability and not being pulled in different directions, I really think that's one of the major factors because we are less distractible. There are so many things that happen in a school building that can pull us away. So there is this feeling of I don't have time. And it's not that we're making it up. It's just, wow, we feel like every moment is taken and filled with something else. And then it's really I really have found that it's more about access and parents being comfortable. Because if you think about what is required for a parent to come into a school building during the week who is working, let's say, an hourly wage. They don't have sick days. They don't have that luxury of taking time off without losing pay. Someone that maybe needs transportation support, or even if they're sharing transportation with someone else, it allows them to be more involved in the process. And I have really enjoyed navigating what that looks like. So number one, I use Google Voice. I have my own little phone number in there, and I've learned that parents really respond well to me sending reminders for rating scales via text message, for example. That opens line of communication with them. They might have the capacity and the time to shoot me a text back, and we can set up a time to have a phone call if that's appropriate, right? If they feel like they need some more support. I've also found that I can get parents in to talk to me and more involved because they're not having to spend hours driving to the school, being at the school, driving back to work. It's less stress on them, and they just feel like they can sit comfortably and take a deep breath. And it's not rushed. I've had parents, if they have multiple kids or kids with disabilities they're trying to support, they're more likely to have more energy for the meeting. Rightfully so, right? When you think about all the demands on parents, when they can have the option of getting on virtually, either doing a rating form or having a consultation or going to an IEP meeting, we can sit there and just have a 10-minute conversation on what their rights are. The more they get exposed to that, right, the more they understand the process. But if we have parents who, you have child study, you have the rating form, you have the meeting, you have the IEP, like how many days are they taking off, right? And sometimes parents will say, oh, you can meet without me, right? Because they're like, I can't imagine taking another day off of work when I just took off 3 days, I'm going to lose my job, or, I don't have any sick leave left or anything like that. I think the more the parents can get in, the more they learn the process and the more they get used to it over time. Just more of a consistency type of thing. Yeah. And elephant in the room too, when a parent walks into a building and they're sitting in a room with 7 other people, it's really intimidating. Especially if there's someone, I think a lot of times one of the first questions they ask me is, if my kid's eligible for special ed, are they going to be in a separate room? I was in special ed. So a lot of parents are coming in with already hesitation, right? Or maybe some anxiety based upon their school experience.
Yeah.
I really think it just kind of lets people take a deep breath and not worry about a lot of other factors that could be impacting them.
Yeah. I think we talked about this a little bit when we were doing our voice texting back and forth on Instagram. For anyone who doesn't know, we met through Instagram. And we've been voice texting for months. But yeah, something we also talked about is, I like how you mentioned that. So many parents that might have themselves been through the special education process or whatever, maybe they're an English language learner, maybe they have multiple kids at home, so they can't drop everything to just run to a meeting when they can't find childcare, whatever it is. I think it's so common for parents when you walk into a physical room and you have all of these experts, right? It's so hard to ask clarifying questions, and it's so hard to receive something when someone's trying to explain it and maybe there's jargon, or maybe you're trying to rush through the meeting as these experts on the IEP team that are trying to get to the next meeting, right?
Yeah.
It's so intimidating to even think of did I even understand what they just told me, or do I need to go back home and ask someone else? Because even asking a clarifying question or saying I don't understand that, it's really expecting a lot of the one person in the room who seems to be, and they assume they're the only confused one or the only one that needs clarity. That is really, really hard.
Yes.
So do you feel like you've been more bold or more transparent with parents in your communication now with families than you were in the past? Or how would you say that compares?
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of it is more so experience in the field too. I think the more experience we get, I don't know if you feel this way, but I feel like the longer I'm in the field and I work with parents and I'm in my profession, the bolder I get. And I also think it helps too, being treated like a professional, because some settings that I've been in before, it was more so, kind of challenge the school psych's opinion rather than see them as the expert in the room. But my experience in virtual, and I don't know if it's because you're contracted or what, but I just feel like I'm more respected as a professional, and the parents and the community just truly wants to do the best for their kids. So they'll ask me questions, and then I'm just very honest and open with them. And maybe that's why it's continued to be this way. Parents talk, right? Parents say that's our school psych, or she's really good, or, it was confusing. Parents talk about how things go. So I don't know if it's because I was in the same place for 3 years that the community really got to know me and embrace me more. So we all felt more comfortable together. Or if it's just a combination of, being virtual, being contracted, and just being more seasoned in the profession.
And just to clarify, how many schools are you assisting with right now, and what are the age levels?
So we're currently short-staffed, so I support 7 schools. I evaluate for 5. So when you think about true special education, evaluation, assessment, that kind of thing, for 5, and they are elementary to middle. And then I support 2 high schools with 504s as well. So I do 504s for all of those schools, but primarily special ed for elementary and middle school. Yeah.
And what does your caseload look like for specifically assessments, whether that's incoming assessments like initials or triennials?
We do about 60 on average per year as far as evaluations, but that really, again, not all places are created equal because it depends on what your evaluations look like. So we do everything for our evaluations, educational, cognitive, rating scales, everything. So we're very involved in that assessment process. It just looks a little bit differently than, and I get primarily initials because I have some pretty large elementary schools. So I would say probably 70% of my caseload is initials and the other 30% is reevaluation.
Which in my opinion is like the most important touch point for a parent because you're the first person that they're going to have interaction with when they're entering this whole world of special education for many, many years potentially, right?
Yes.
So yeah, you're really having to do the work to create the rapport, create a really good start, right?
Yeah, I think too, just getting good rapport with your team when you're, in person and in virtual. And I think relationships are just so crucial when you're virtual because your team needs to know they can rely on you too, to have those tough conversations. So, I don't think one's better than the other. I think it's just the way that we are intentional about making relationships. I still have to work hard in doing that virtually, just like I would in person.
Mm-hmm. What do you feel like are the really most important things that parents would want to know, but often are never told?
Something that I really pride myself on is explaining parent rights, no matter what. So whether we're in an RTI meeting, going to referral, or we are in an eligibility meeting, I make sure that I explain what their rights are. And I think that's what helps me be bold and open with the parent, but also draw the boundary, right? Here are what your rights are. Here's what we can do. Here's the difference between in-school and medical, for example. Here's what that looks like. You have the right to choose, right? And just kind of giving them their options and letting them know what that looks like. Instead of, passing judgment or being like, oh my gosh, why are they referring their kid on Monday, May 19th? Instead of having that type of framework, which I know we kind of whisper to ourselves, right? We're like, oh my gosh, it's 7 days left in the school year. How are we going to do this? But just asking yourself, like, what are they actually looking for? I can tell you, I think it was 8 meetings this year that a parent requested testing. I went into the meeting, explained their rights and what their options were, and they didn't choose testing. They chose intervention because they wanted their kid to be helped. And so I think...
Love that.
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing is just letting parents know what their options are and what their rights are. Instead of going into meetings on the defense, go into meetings to inform. Like, that's what our job is. When you think about our ethics, it's students, families, schools, and communities. Like, it's all of it. So, how are we bettering the way that they get to support their kid in the future, whatever that looks like? Because if they know their rights now, whether or not they go into evaluation or not, if down the road they want evaluation, they know what their rights are again when they go to advocate for their kid. Gosh, what else? Special ed is something that can be effective for kids, but a lot of kids don't exit out. I think that's something that I would want parents to know is, we don't see a lot of exiting. And that doesn't mean that your kid's not getting good intervention, but remembering that it's just not a quick fix. Sometimes the intervention they're getting at tier 3 may be more effective than the special education services they're going to get in a small group. And I think we think that SPED is like the gold end all be all, but sometimes for some kids it's not going to be the most effective for them.
Right.
Good tier 3 might be the most effective for them.
It's so fascinating when parents are pushed to the back burner of like, yeah, we're giving these interventions. Yeah, we're like continuing to help, but there really is not a strong documentation process, or maybe not
Yeah.
a strong team to implement those things, right? And then you get the parent to the point of like, well, what is the next help? And then it's like,
Yes.
okay, special education, let's get into that. And that's going to be like the saving grace. And there's finally going to be support for my kid. And yeah, I love that little mention that sometimes tier three of an RTI, a good RTI team, response to intervention team of really solid documentation and implementation might be better, right, for some
Yeah.
kids. And I think especially as you get into the older grades, because a
Yeah.
lot of the stigma might come with special education, being different than peers, doing different classes than peers, right?
For sure.
So like, I know that's hard to hear. As a parent,
Yeah.
that's difficult to hear. But yeah, and that comes back to our educators also knowing their rights and knowing what their responsibility is, and clear cut documentation step by step. This is what an implementation looks like and should look
Yes.
like. And guess what? It could be better for your child, or like better for your student than even going over to assessments, right?
Right.
So I love that you shared that. And then you said retention. I think it's a misconception, especially for a little bit older generations, that like,
Hmm.
oh, they're struggling. We just need to put them back through the same grade. The research shows very, very opposite.
Yes. And same thing with parents, right? Like going into a meeting, ask questions. So I had two meetings like this. It's the end of the year. These kids that maybe were recommending for evaluation, right? Retention came up in that meeting, in that child study or school-based referral team meeting. And I just asked questions like, okay, how would this affect her socially and emotionally? Let's think about that. Like truly having like groupthink essentially. How's that going to impact her? Considering all variables surrounding what retention would look like for her, do we think it would be detrimental in that area? Okay, next step. She's got an intervention in this grade, she's got instruction in this grade, and she's not responding. So do we want to repeat the same thing that we just did and hope that it works this time? Or do we want to do a different intervention and move on? So I think asking the right questions, both from a parent perspective and from a professional perspective, can make a really big difference. Because then people start to think, instead of saying like, you shouldn't retain, right? Or you should retain, then everyone starts thinking outside the box of like, actually, I found out the kid moved. She just moved there. So, okay, there's another variable. She just got a social group. This is going to be really detrimental to her going into the next grade, losing a third social group, so.
And I think that hits on something too, that as educators, I think you mentioned this earlier, of like, you weren't always seen as the expert at the IEP team table. And I
Yeah.
think that's really common in a lot of, depending on the rapport of the team. I feel like so many people can come defensive to the table, even with their own teams,
Mm-hmm.
where to have groupthink, to have like collaboration openly in a meeting like that in front of a parent is almost just like, we can't do that. Like, we have to come prepared with the answers and ready to know what our game plan is. And it's like,
Yeah.
it's okay to have collaboration and change your mind or come with new data and make a better decision in the meeting. That type of collaboration it's so important, but it's not done well all the time. So
Yeah.
it's nice to hear your teams are doing it well.
Yes. And, even I think it's important to just speak out loud. Like, I'm the elephant in the room person. And I'll just preface it. I'll be like, I'm just going to be really transparent with you as a professional and someone that cares about your student. Like, this is something that I'm concerned about as a professional, but also a question that I have for you as a parent. And I just put it out there in a very non-judgmental way. And I think when people are open like that, it also allows people to not be so blocked off and rigid. They're able to be like, oh, actually, yeah, I was kind of thinking that too, or, and then the parent feels more comfortable than, oh my gosh, am I gonna have to defend myself this whole meeting?
So to shift gears a little bit to talk about you specifically beyond the job, because I know you're also passionate about wellness, and that plays a big part in how you show up in your work, and even like you mentioned, the mental health aspect. So can you share a bit about your own wellness journey and what practices or routines help keep you grounded and thriving?
Sure. My husband would laugh. He'd be like, are you gonna tell him your whole routine? I actually had this asked. if an employer is listening to this, and you might not be, but the best question I've ever been asked in an interview was, how do you set boundaries and take care of your mental health? And I was like, yes, let me go ahead and tell you, because that means they prioritize it. And I'm like, this is incredible, because you need to prioritize it. So whether you're a professional, whether, a professional and a parent, it can be really overwhelming to know that you are supporting students and teams, and that the things that you do directly impact someone else's education. We're waking up every day, and what we do and say has implications for someone else's life, right? And that can be very fulfilling, but also very exhausting all at the same time. So I really make sure I get up in the morning and I move my body in some way. It's just like I need time in the morning to kind of settle and make sure that if I am stressed about something, I can kind of like release it and go into my day with a more positive, energetic outlook, because I know that's going to impact the way that I interact with people, interact with the kids, how I show up in meetings. Sleep. Sleep is so key. My friends have a nickname for me that's not appropriate for this podcast, but it's regards to sleeping and loving it. It's a garden tool. I'm a sleep garden tool.
Oh my God.
And that is who I am. I went through a lot of health issues back 2018, 19, going forward. I was in adrenal fatigue, and it taught me a lot about rest and, 7 hours minimum. And if you can't get the 7 hours, at least do the habits that allow you to get better quality sleep. So, decreasing your screen time, actually like going to bed at a reasonable hour, getting out and moving my body, like just being able to go outside makes a huge difference. I always say like the things that are free, right? Like moving your body, drinking water, getting sunshine, getting more sleep, like those are free things that you can do. And that's really what's grounding. Everything else is just extra, right? Like everything else is just, the meal plans and the supplements. It's just all extra, right? But if you're not doing the foundational piece, then you're just not really going to get the full benefit. So being able to just consistently do that makes a difference.
Yeah. And I love how you actually used that as like your guide for going into virtual school psychology too.
Yeah.
Because it's like recognizing where you're feeling the fatigue, you're feeling the burnout, and making a change in that, not just like your career, but also in your home life, also in your personal life. Like that's so important to where you're not burning out even in your personal life.
Yeah. And
So
I've
that's
been
real.
there. I've been burnt to the crisp, okay? Like having to
Right.
say no to a lot of things and really just choose what serves you. And, I know parents will listen to this, and, supporting your kids sometimes looks like saying no to certain things, right? And I have friends who, their kids have games at like 9 o'clock at night. I'm like, first of all, who is making these decisions? Because that's bedtime. It's just like some things, unfortunately, we live in a world where there is no off switch unless we turn it off. So just really think about like what your off switch is and what you have to balance so that you don't feel like you're running on fumes, especially if you're putting out a lot of energy into trying to navigate special education or even 504s for your children.
Yeah, 100%. That's so true. And
Yeah.
I think for those professionals that are in the field of special education, and yes, we're 100%, we're burnt out, we're taxed, like you said, there's no downtime, especially when you're in a school. Like all of the space seems to be filled up. Like how much more are parents who don't get that break in terms
Right.
of they're a parent until that child is 18 or even, even older, depending on the needs of their child. And so I think when I became a parent, that shift really happened for me where I'm like, oh my gosh, like I felt so much more empathy for parents that had, children with special needs. So I love that you mentioned that too, because yeah, it's true. Like just
Yeah.
as much as mental health matters for educators, like it matters for parents as well.
For sure.
So outside of your role as a school psychologist, what fills your cup these days? What do you love to do? What are your interests?
I'm just a mega nerd. I'm a mega nerd. I really love reading about just like scientific things. I love learning about, right now I'm really into like sleep and like trauma and effects on the body and how to heal that. That's been something that I've
Body
been
keeps the
reading on.
score.
Yes, the body keeps the score. If you read no other book in your entire lifetime, please read that book. It is very dense. I recommend taking lots of breaks reading it.
And don't read it while you're driving, or like don't do an audiobook. That was me. I was driving to grad school, and for those of you that haven't read the book, there's a pretty traumatic car accident that's explained in that book. While I
Yes.
was driving, that was not a good choice. I was like, let me turn this off right now.
Maybe go for a walk while you read it,
There
maybe
you
in the
go.
shower. Great book though. So I love learning about that. I think that I think it's something that we're going to need to know more about as we progress in this field. And that it actually informs a lot about what I see in evaluations and just the overall scope of it all. I love fitness. So I actually teach at a yoga studio for fun.
That's so fun.
I love it so much. And something that I noticed too, and people ask me, like, do you miss people? I'm like, yes, I miss people. I'm extremely extroverted. So working from home all day, every day is hard just because I need human beings. So I actually started, it's been about a year now, I started teaching at Yoga 6. And so I teach there twice, and that is just so fun. I really enjoy that. I do like workshops there.
That's
And I just
awesome.
love being outside. Let me go outside, let me go for a hike, let me climb a mountain. We live near the Appalachian Mountains, so we're about 20, 30 minutes from just being able to hike on the Appalachian Trail,
That's
which is
awesome.
awesome. But yeah, and traveling, just let me travel. My interests are just going, I guess. I'm very active. And my cats are my interests who do not like me to be in my office by myself. Yeah,
I
just
love
really
that.
into like finding things that are healing and supportive because like we're all just trying to regulate our nervous systems. So just
100%.
trying to find ways to do that are fun.
I love that. I don't know if you have like an actual group that you coach for wellness, or what is all of that?
Yeah, so I do one-on-one coaching for fitness and nutrition. So I actually run a group every month, and I take on new clients every month, and then people stay with me for however long they need to. But I help with meal planning, I do macro coaching, and we have workouts that we do during the week. So they're accessible for everyone. So you can do them from wherever, whenever, which is very good for people that are busy and have packed schedules. But yeah, that's what I do. I have a group and I support people where they are. So some people are just doing nutrition. Some are doing nutrition and workouts. Some are doing just mindset, like yoga and things like that. So it really just depends on what that person's looking for. But yeah.
That's awesome. And how many clients do you take on a month?
I take 10 a month.
That's
Yes.
awesome.
Yeah, it's a good
I
time.
love that. Yeah. I know I've seen like stuff on your stories. Like I feel like you've
Yeah.
shared about it on your stories, but Instagram is all over the place with, the algorithm. So sometimes I see it,
Yes.
sometimes I don't. And then I'm like, where did it go? I don't know. But I'm glad you shared about that. That's awesome. This conversation has been such a gift. I love how it's been really thinking outside the box, especially for educators that are looking for something different in their field. I know there's a lot of people that are going to walk away from this feeling empowered and informed about, different career options or different ideas of how to support their kids. So I love that. But before we wrap up, what's one final message or takeaway that you would love to leave with families or professionals who are listening?
Oh, one takeaway would be to truly just trust your voice and go into whatever situation you are facing, whether that is, like I said, advocacy or going into a new job, and just truly lean into your true voice and your passion and let people see that. Because I think right now we are craving that in society, people who are still passionate and on fire for what they believe in, while also working to be a part of a collective team. So just keep that fire burning, even though it can be frustrating sometimes, or you can feel like maybe you're not the most, educated or professional in that area. Just really show up with a kind heart, and you can't lose. You can't lose.
That's so sweet. Thank you for that. And for people that might want to connect with you, maybe learn about your work or your coaching, where can they find you?
So you can find me on Instagram. That's where I live the most, at Courtney Johnson, and you'll see that I have a little link tree situation happening. Click on that, and there are like some freebies in there. If you want to set up a one-on-one call with me, you can do that too. So there's a bunch of different ways to kind of plug yourself in if you want to do that.
Thank you everyone for tuning into Holistically Psych today. If you found value in today's episode, be sure to subscribe, share with a fellow parent or educator, and leave a review so others can find this space as well. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.
Thanks so much for joining me today. I would be so grateful if you could share this with anyone you can think of who works in education or happens to have a child with disabilities. If this was helpful for you, make sure to subscribe so you can hear some of the crazy and amazing stories of what is really going on behind the scenes in public education. Until next time, remember, in the famous words of Maya Angelou, each child belongs to all of us, and they bring us a tomorrow in direct relation to the responsibility we have shown to them.